asked him what happened, they got to need to go and examine themselves. You thought he was going to walk up to that gas station where you was waiting on him at for 5 minutes. Within 5 minutes, you see ambulance, you see police, you see ambulance, you see police, and you know something ain't right. So you get in your car and get back there to the scene with my nephew getting in on a stretcher, getting in the back of an ambulance. Okay, he was in a cabin on Saturday about 4, 5 o'clock that afternoon. Stepdaddy drove. He like a superstar in our eyes. He got a loving heart, and he loved LULU, what it do till the grounds come home. A thin line between love and hate. And see what went on with my nephew. Guess what? I wasn't there. Y'all wasn't there. LULU was there. And at the end of the day, nobody knows but God. And it's gonna come forward. How he fell at the gas station and bumped his head when you claimed to put him out of car. And you pulled off and left my nephew in Gainesville somewhere. You and him the only ones there. No family, no people, no nothing. You left my nephew. Oh no, my nephew.
A man is found dead under a bridge. The police write the wrong name on the report. Witnesses say nobody ever called them. And the woman who claimed to love him? She's gone quiet, right when questions are getting louder. This is the story of Tyrone Lamar Davis Jr., known to everyone who loved him as DRO. And this is the story of a family that refuses to let a broken system bury the truth along with him. Before we go any further, everything in this documentary is based on publicly available information, family statements, and verified reporting. This is not a court of law. We are not convicting anyone. We are asking questions that deserve answers. If you have information about this case, please contact the Gainesville Police Department or reach out to the Davis family through their official channels. Now, let's talk about DRO. 35 years old. A father. A son. A man described by everyone who knew him as someone who lit up a room, not with noise but with presence. The kind of person who meant what he said and said what he meant. His aunt Natasha, who has become the family's loudest voice in the fight for justice, said it plainly. Tyrone Lamar Davis wasn't a man of talk. He was a man of action. And then one day he was gone. Found on Archer Road in Gainesville, Florida, underneath the overpass of Interstate 75. Blunt force trauma to the head. The Gainesville Police Department ruled it suspicious. The family ruled it murder. And from the moment that report hit, almost nothing about this case has made sense. This documentary is going to walk you through everything. The timeline, the relationships, the witness who says she saw it all from beginning to end, the girlfriend who went silent, and an aunt who is standing in the gap for a nephew who can no longer speak for himself. Stay with us, because the deeper you go into this case, the more questions pile up. And some of those questions have answers that someone, somewhere, is working very hard to keep buried. Let's start at the beginning. Gainesville, Florida. A mid-sized city in Alachua County, home to the University of Florida, a vibrant community, and like most American cities, neighborhoods where poverty and inequality have always run just beneath the surface of the postcard version of the place. Gainesville is not a city that makes national news often. But when it does, it tends to be for the kind of story that reveals something uncomfortable about how justice works, and who it works for. Tyrone Lamar Davis Jr. grew up in that world. He was 35 years old at the time of his death. He had children, kids in middle school, kids who were counting on their father to show up for the milestones that matter. A daughter named Chloe whose prom he'll never attend. A son whose graduation he'll never witness. Those aren't just emotional details, they're the human cost of what happened under that bridge. Every time this case stalls, every time a call doesn't get returned, every time a witness says no one reached out, those are the people paying the price. His family called him DRO. And by all accounts, DRO was the kind of man his community remembered. Not a perfect man, no one is, but a real one. Someone with roots, with relationships, with people who loved him. His aunt Natasha has been the face of the family's public push for justice, and if you've watched any of her live streams, you know she doesn't mince words. She is grieving and she is furious and she is doing something remarkable. She is channeling all of that into action. Now, let's talk about how Tyrone Davis Jr. died, or more precisely, how little we actually know about how he died. His body was found on Archer Road, beneath the I-75 overpass. Blunt force trauma to the head. That's the clinical language. In plain terms, someone hit him. Hard enough to kill him. And then he ended up under a bridge. The family says he did not jump out of a car. The family says he did not commit suicide. And when you look at the circumstances, when you look at who DRO was, at the relationships around him, at the timeline of events, that position is not coming from denial. It's coming from knowledge. The knowledge that people who love someone have when they know that person well enough to say, "This doesn't add up." And the police? The Gainesville Police Department has, according to the family, provided almost nothing in terms of answers. But here's where it gets impossible to ignore. They couldn't even get his name right on the police report. His name is Tyrone Lamar Davis. The police report listed him as Tyrone Eugene Davis. That's not a typo. That's not a clerical slip that you shrug off. That's a fundamental failure of basic procedure in a case involving a man's death. And if that's where the investigation started, the family has every right to ask what else got missed. Natasha has said it directly on her live streams. The Gainesville Police Department has failed them in every way possible. Witnesses have come forward and said no one contacted them. Not just the people who were near the scene. There was a man who reached out to the family before investigators even got to the bridge. That's not a detail you bury in the middle of a live stream. That's a headline. Someone had information and the police weren't the ones who heard it first. This is the pattern in cases like this. And it's a pattern that true crime followers know all too well. When law enforcement drops the ball early, when the initial investigation is sloppy, when witnesses are missed, when paperwork has errors, the ripple effects can derail everything that comes after. Evidence gets contaminated. Leads go cold. And families are left standing outside the system, knocking on doors that no one opens. That's where the Davis family found themselves. And that's why they made a decision that more and more families of victims are making. They decided to hire their own. A private investigator. It costs money. Real money. The kind of money that a grieving family already dealing with loss and funeral expenses and the emotional weight of fighting a system that isn't designed to help them, doesn't easily have sitting around. But Natasha announced it publicly, with transparency, with specificity, and with a clear-eyed understanding of why it was necessary. The family had reached a turning point. They'd spent enough time speculating, enough time waiting, enough time hoping that the official channels would deliver something. They hadn't. So it was time to go outside those channels. The private investigator they identified had over 25 years of experience. High-profile background. Already familiar with the case before the family even formally brought him on board. He'd done his homework independently, seen enough to believe this was worth his time. That's not a small thing. Private investigators with that kind of track record don't take cases they don't believe in. There's too much reputation on the line. Now, let's talk about money for a moment. Not because it's the most important thing in this story, but because it's one of the most honest things about it. We live in a society where the quality of your justice often correlates directly with the size of your wallet. If you have money, you hire lawyers, private investigators, forensic experts. You build a parallel investigation that supplements or challenges the official one. If you don't have money, you wait. And waiting in a murder investigation is the same as losing ground. The Davis family was asking the public, their community, strangers, anyone who felt moved, to help close that gap. And the response said something important about what people believe in when the cause is right. People who said they'd give when they got paid Friday. People who gave what they could even when it wasn't much. People who couldn't give money but offered prayers and information and shared posts until the algorithm pushed it somewhere it needed to go. There is something deeply human about that kind of collective response to injustice. And there's something painful about the fact that it's necessary at all. That the question of whether Tyrone Davis Jr. gets justice might come down to whether enough strangers on the internet donate to a PayPal. That shouldn't be the system. But it is the system. And the Davis family is working within it because they have no other choice. Now we need to talk about the witness. This is where the case gets significantly more complicated. A new witness came forward. A woman who claimed she saw what happened to Tyrone Davis Jr. from beginning to end. Not a partial account. Not a glimpse. Beginning to end. Who is this woman? That's a question the family was sitting with publicly. The details that were circulating, and let's be clear, information in an active investigation is often partial, sometimes wrong and always subject to revision, described her as a European woman, possibly homeless, who had been in the area around the time of the incident. Now here's where you have to be careful. And where good journalism, and good true crime documentary work, has an obligation to pump the brakes before racing ahead. A witness coming forward is a significant development. Always. But a witness coming forward in a case with as many moving parts and as much public attention as this one requires scrutiny. Not dismissal, scrutiny. There's a difference. Natasha herself was measured about it, publicly on her live stream, which took a kind of intellectual honesty that's easy to miss if you're watching for emotion rather than content. She said plainly, "We can't say what's right or what's wrong about this witness. We have to take any information that comes our way and run with it, because we don't know what happened. We don't know. That's a remarkable thing for a grieving family member to say in public. She didn't jump on the witness account and declare it the smoking gun. She didn't dismiss it because it came from an unfamiliar source. She held it with open hands, took it seriously, passed it to the right people and kept her focus on the larger goal. But the public reaction was different. On live streams and comment sections in the wider community watching this case, the witness account generated heat. People questioned her credibility. People defended her. People made assumptions in both directions based on very little. And that's where true crime communities, for all the good they can do in raising awareness and applying pressure, can sometimes introduce noise into a signal. Not with bad intentions usually. With the urgency that comes from caring about a case. But urgency without discipline can muddy the waters for investigators, can discourage actual witnesses, and can create parallel narratives that distract from the central question. What actually happened to DRO? Let's talk about what we do know and what we don't. And why the line between those two things matters enormously. What we know: Tyrone Lamar Davis Jr., 35 years old, was found dead on Archer Road beneath the I-75 overpass in Gainesville, Florida. Blunt force trauma to the head. His name was incorrectly listed on the initial police report. Multiple witnesses have stated they were never contacted by investigators. A new witness has come forward claiming she observed the events that led to his death. The family does not believe this was a suicide or accident. What we don't know: the complete sequence of events on the night or day he died. Who was with him? What led him to that location? Whether the witness account is accurate, partial, or mistaken. Whether the Gainesville Police Department's investigation is ongoing and simply not being communicated to the family, or whether it has effectively stalled. What the girlfriend, referred to publicly as LULU, knows or has shared with investigators. That last point is one we need to spend some time on. LUL. In the original video that prompted this documentary, the title references Tyrone Davis Jr.'s girlfriend, described as LULU, and a statement that she is done. Done with the situation. Done with the public scrutiny. Or done in a more final sense that the family may be reading between the lines of. In true crime cases, the romantic partner is almost always a person of interest. Not because partners are always guilty, but because intimate relationships carry the context, the history, and sometimes the conflict that law enforcement needs to understand a person's final days or hours. What was Tyrone's state of mind? Who had he recently argued with? Who knew his routines? Who knew where he'd be? Those are questions that a partner can often answer better than anyone. And when a partner goes quiet, when they step back from the public conversation, when they stop making statements, when they pull away from the family, it creates a vacuum. And vacuums in true crime cases get filled with speculation. Some of it fair. Some of it wildly unfair. We are not here to convict LULU of anything. We don't know what she knows. We don't know what she's shared with police. We don't know if she's staying quiet on advice of counsel, out of grief, out of fear, or for reasons we can't see from the outside. What we do know is that the family has noticed her silence. And in the court of public attention, which is very different from the court of law, that silence speaks loudly even if it shouldn't always. Here's something worth understanding about how grief and suspicion interact in cases like this. When a family is left in the dark, when official investigators aren't communicating, when stories keep changing, when people around the situation go quiet, every person connected to the victim becomes a data point. The family builds their own picture from the data points they have. And the people who go dark become the question marks on that picture. That's not unfair. That's human. But it's also worth naming clearly so that we don't slide from, the family has noticed LULU's silence and finds it troubling, into LULU is responsible for what happened to DRO. Those are very different statements. And in a documentary that wants to be honest, that distinction matters. What the family is asking for is not a public conviction. What they're asking for is for anyone who knows anything to come forward. For the police to do their job. For the truth to have a chance to surface. And they're asking for LULU, if she has information, to share it. Not in public if she's not comfortable with that. With investigators. With a private investigator now working the case. Somewhere that it can actually help. Let's step back from the specifics of this case for a moment and talk about a pattern. Because the Tyrone Davis Jr. case doesn't exist in isolation. It lives inside a much larger story about how black men die in America, and how those deaths are, or aren't, investigated. This is not a political statement. It's a documented reality that criminologists, sociologists, and journalists have studied for decades. When a black man is found dead under suspicious circumstances in an American city, the statistical likelihood of that death receiving the same investigative attention as a comparable death involving a white victim is lower. That's not opinion. That's data. Study after study has found racial disparities in how law enforcement prioritizes homicide investigations. Cases involving black victims are closed at lower rates. Resources are allocated unequally. The implicit and explicit biases baked into policing and the justice system shape which deaths get treated as tragedies worthy of pursuit and which get quietly filed away. The Davis family isn't just fighting for DRO. They're fighting against a system that has a documented history of failing families that look like theirs. Every live stream Natasha does, every dollar raised for the private investigator, every witness she tracks down on her own, that's not just grief. That's resistance. The kind of resistance that doesn't make the nightly news but that changes what happens on the ground. And here's what the true crime community, when it functions at its best, can actually do in cases like this. Attention matters. Public pressure matters. When a case gets enough eyeballs on it, when enough people are asking questions and demanding answers, when journalists and content creators are holding law enforcement accountable in public, things move. Not always. Not fast enough. But they move. We've seen it before. We've seen it with cases that started as local tragedies and became national conversations. Cases where outside attention forced police departments to take another look, to bring in additional resources, to treat a death that was heading toward a cold case like the open wound it actually was. That's what's possible here. That's what the Davis family is trying to build. Not a circus, not a mob. A searchlight. Bright enough and sustained enough that whoever is responsible for what happened to Tyrone Lamar Davis Jr. can't hide in the dark forever. Let's go deeper into the night itself. Or what we can piece together about it. Tyrone Davis Jr. was 35 years old, living his life in Gainesville, Florida. A father. A man with relationships. With his family, with his children, with a girlfriend, with a community. He was not isolated. He was not a ghost. He was a person embedded in other people's lives. The circumstances that led him to that overpass on Archer Road, we don't know them in full. What the family has said publicly is that he was in love. That he wasn't stupid. That whoever came for him came from the back. Meaning, Natasha's phrasing suggests he didn't see it coming. Or didn't expect it from whoever delivered the blow. That's a significant thing to say. It implies a level of trust, however misplaced. It implies that DRO wasn't expecting danger from the direction it came from. In homicide investigations, that's often one of the most important early questions. Did the victim know their attacker? And if so, how? What was the nature of that relationship? Was there conflict? Was there a history? Was there something, money, love, loyalty, that turned? The fact that multiple witnesses existed near the scene, that people saw things, knew things, and yet weren't contacted by investigators until the family and the public started making noise, is alarming. In a straightforward investigation, witness canvassing happens immediately. You don't wait for a grieving aunt to track people down on Facebook Live. The man who contacted the family before investigators even reached the bridge is a detail that deserves its own chapter in this story. Who was he? What did he see? Did he eventually speak with police? Was his account considered? Or did it get lost somewhere in the gap between what the family knew and what was written on an official report? We don't have those answers yet. And that's precisely the point. There is a version of events that exists. A version in which someone knows exactly what happened to Tyrone Davis Jr. They may be living with it quietly. They may have told people who don't know what to do with what they've heard. They may be waiting for something, for the noise to die down, for the family to give up, for the story to fall off the public's radar. That's the bet that people who commit violent acts and avoid immediate consequences are always making. That time is on their side. That grief is exhausting. That families run out of steam. The Davis family is making a different bet. They're betting that the truth has a longer shelf life than silence. And they're putting their money, literally, on a private investigator with 25 years of experience to help prove it. Let's talk about private investigators and what they can actually do in cases like this. A private investigator operating in a murder case is not the same as law enforcement. They don't have arrest powers. They can't compel testimony. They can't access certain official records without going through proper legal channels. But here's what they can do, and what makes them valuable in cases where the official investigation has stalled or failed to gain traction. They can interview witnesses without the baggage that comes with a badge. Sometimes people who won't talk to police, for any number of reasons that range from distrust to fear to prior experiences with law enforcement, will talk to a private investigator. Especially one who is working on behalf of a victim's family. The dynamic is different. The stakes feel different. And sometimes that different dynamic opens doors that official investigation has kept closed. They can look at evidence with fresh eyes. When a case has been handled, or mishandled, by an initial team, the assumptions baked into that initial handling can create blind spots. A private investigator coming in later without those assumptions sometimes sees things that were overlooked. Not because investigators were incompetent, necessarily, but because any investigation carries the fingerprints of the framework through which it was initially approached. They can document and preserve. In cases where law enforcement isn't moving, a private investigator can create a documented record of what witnesses say, what physical evidence exists, what the timeline looks like, documentation that can become the foundation for later legal action, for a DA's review, for a civil suit if a criminal case doesn't materialize. And perhaps most importantly in the Tyrone Davis Jr. case, they can apply sustained, professional pressure. Not the pressure of a live stream which comes in waves. Not the pressure of public outrage which rises and falls with the news cycle. Consistent, professional pressure. The kind that tells whoever is responsible, this isn't going away. We are still looking. We are still finding things. And we are not going to stop. Over 25 years of experience. High-profile background. Ready to go. If that description is accurate, and there's no reason from the public statements to doubt it, then the Davis family has found a serious ally. And serious allies in a case like this can change the trajectory. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in true crime coverage. The cost of being the family. Natasha has been doing live streams. Regular ones. She's managing a public case while grieving privately. She's absorbing comments, positive and negative, from strangers who have strong opinions about her nephew, her family, her methods, her tone. She's tracking witnesses, coordinating payment systems, maintaining relationships with other advocates and content creators who are amplifying the story. All of this while missing DRO. She said something in one of her live streams that landed quietly but deserves to be heard loudly. She said she ministers to herself as she ministers to others. That's not a throwaway line. That's a woman who knows she is pouring from a vessel that constantly needs refilling. Who understands that maintaining her own stability is part of what allows her to sustain the fight. That's wisdom. And it's hard-won wisdom. Because the alternative, collapsing under the weight of grief and the pressure of a public campaign, would serve no one. Not her. Not the family. Not DRO. There's a particular kind of strength that shows up in people who are left to fight for their loved ones in public. It doesn't look the way we sometimes expect strength to look. It's not always composed. It's not always articulate. It comes in waves, fierce one moment, breaking down the next, fierce again. And it is absolutely relentless. Natasha, on her live streams, has been all of those things. And the people in that chat, Diamond Girl Johnson, Tangela Freeman, Latrice Williams, Cindy Henderson, Danielle Davis, all of them, they are not just viewers. They are community. They are the scaffolding holding up someone who is holding up a cause. That matters. And it's worth naming. Let's talk about what justice actually looks like in a case like this. Because justice for DRO is a rallying cry, and it should be. But it's worth being specific about what that means in concrete terms. Justice, in a criminal context, means investigation, arrest, and conviction. It means that whoever is responsible for the death of Tyrone Lamar Davis Jr. is identified, charged, tried, and found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It means a jury hears the evidence. It means a judge imposes a sentence. It means the person responsible faces legal consequences for what they did. That process is long. It is expensive. It is imperfect. It can fail at every stage: investigation, arrest, trial. Cases that seem solid fall apart. Cases that seem impossible get cracked open by a single piece of evidence or a single witness who finally decides to talk. Justice in a civil context means the family potentially suing responsible parties, the person who caused the death, or possibly law enforcement if their negligence can be proven to have contributed to the failure to solve the case. Civil standards are different from criminal ones. The burden of proof is lower. And civil suits have, in high-profile cases, sometimes been the mechanism through which families get both answers and accountability when the criminal system falls short. And then there's a kind of justice that doesn't fit neatly into a legal category. The justice of the story being told. Of DRO's name being known. Of his children being able to say, when they're older, people cared about what happened to my father. People fought for him. People did not let him be forgotten. That's not small. That doesn't bring him back. But it matters. The Davis family is pursuing all of these forms of justice simultaneously. And the private investigator, the one they're working to fund, is a key piece of all three paths. Because good investigation opens doors. It creates records. It finds witnesses. It builds the foundation that lawyers, prosecutors, and courts need to do their work. Let's address something that comes up in any high-profile case that unfolds in public. The question of misinformation. Cases like this, cases with strong emotional stakes, limited official information and active public interest, are breeding grounds for bad information. Some of it spreads accidentally, through misunderstanding or misreading. Some of it spreads because social media rewards the most dramatic version of any story, true or not. And occasionally, some of it spreads deliberately, to confuse, to distract, or to protect someone who wants the noise to go in the wrong direction. Natasha has navigated this. She's been clear that she takes incoming information for what it is, not as confirmed fact but as a lead, a thread, something to hand to the professionals who can evaluate it properly. That's the right posture. That's exactly how a family advocate should operate. But the community around the case needs to operate the same way. Which means, share information but label it clearly. I heard is different from I know. Someone told me is different from it's confirmed that. In a case where lives and reputations are at stake, including the reputation of people who may be entirely innocent but who have been named in speculation, precision matters. The witness who came forward, whoever she is, whatever she saw, deserves to be treated as a potential source of information, not a definitive narrator of events. She may be completely truthful and completely accurate. She may be truthful but mistaken about details. She may have a different relationship to events than the version that's been circulating. None of that can be sorted out in a livestream comment section. That gets sorted out through careful, professional investigation. This is why the private investigator matters so much. Not just for the practical work of finding evidence, but for the structural role of being the place where information goes and gets evaluated properly. When the family can say, take that to the PI, instead of let's figure it out in real time on the internet, they're channeling the community's energy into something that might actually move the needle. Let's take a moment with DRO himself. Because in all the noise of a public case, the witnesses, the police failures, the family dynamics, the fundraising, it's easy to lose the person at the center of it. Tyrone Lamar Davis Jr. was 35 years old. He had kids in middle school. He had an aunt who loved him enough to go to war for him in public. He had a community that felt his presence when he was alive and feels his absence now. His aunt said, God knew Tyrone's heart over anyone else's. She said he lived the best life he could live, shining his light to other people. That's the person who was under that bridge. Not a symbol, not a headline, not a hashtag. A man. A father. Someone's nephew. Someone's Duro. His daughter Chloe won't have her dad at prom. His son will walk across a graduation stage without his father watching. Those children are going to grow up carrying both the grief of losing him and the weight of never getting a full explanation of how or why. The least that justice system, formal or informal, can do is give them an answer. A real one. With a name attached to it. Where does the case go from here? The private investigator has the case. The family is raising funds and maintaining public pressure. Witnesses have come forward and will, presumably, be interviewed by someone with the skills and credentials to evaluate their accounts properly. The Gainesville Police Department is, officially, still investigating. What that means in practice, the family isn't sure. What it should mean is that the new witness accounts are being incorporated. That the correct name, Tyrone Lamar Davis, not Tyrone Eugene Davis, is on every document going forward. That the witnesses who weren't initially contacted are being contacted now. That the person who reached out to the family before the police even arrived at the bridge has been fully interviewed. Whether any of that is happening, we don't know. What we do know is that the Davis family is not relying on that hope. They're building the case themselves with professional help, using the resources their community has provided. And they're doing it transparently. Natasha announces updates publicly. Payment methods are posted openly with specific platforms and names. When the investigator's fee is paid in full, she's committed to announcing it. That's accountability. That's the kind of transparency that builds trust with a public that has every reason to be skeptical of informal fundraising in high-profile cases. There's a question that hangs over every unsolved case. What does it take to crack it open? Sometimes it's a piece of physical evidence that was overlooked. A security camera that was never checked. A cell phone record that places someone in the wrong location at the wrong time. Sometimes it's a witness who's been holding something for months and finally decides the weight of it is too heavy to carry alone. Sometimes it's pressure. Sustained, professional public pressure that makes it clear to whoever is responsible that the math has changed. That the reward for staying quiet is no longer greater than the risk of exposure. And sometimes, And this is the hardest thing to say, sometimes cases don't crack open. Sometimes families fight for years and never get the conviction they deserve. Sometimes the system fails completely and a man's death goes officially unanswered. That's the reality. And pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But here's what else is true. The odds of getting justice go up when families fight the way the Davis family is fighting. When witnesses know they're being sought. When investigators, private or official, have names and accounts and records to work with. When the public is paying attention. When the story doesn't go cold because the people who love DRO refuse to let it. The Davis family is not giving up. Natasha said it plainly, staying focused, staying on one accord, not getting distracted by the negativity, not getting pulled into the side arguments that pull resources away from the main goal. Justice, arrest, conviction. That's the target. Everything else is noise. Let's talk about the community around this case. Because it's one of the most remarkable aspects of what's happening. People who never met Tyrone Davis Jr. are sharing posts, donating money, amplifying the family's message. Other advocates and content creators, people with their own platforms and their own audiences, have taken up the cause. The network of people watching, sharing, and pushing this story forward is not a mob. It's a community organized around a common conviction, that DRO deserved better than what he got, and that his family deserves better than silence. That kind of community-driven pressure has a history in American justice. The civil rights movement ran on it. Families of murder victims have used it. Social media has amplified it beyond anything that was possible even a decade ago. And it works. Not always. Not fast enough. But when it works, it's because enough people cared enough for long enough that the weight of collective attention could no longer be ignored. That's what's being built around the Tyrone Davis Jr. case. One live stream at a time. One donation at a time. One shared post at a time. As we come toward the end of this documentary, let's sit with the question that probably brought you here in the first place. What happened to DRO? The honest answer is, we don't know yet. We know he died from blunt force trauma to the head. We know his body was found under a bridge. We know the investigation, as the family experienced it, was fumbled from the start. We know witnesses weren't contacted. We know his name was wrong on the report. We know there is at least one person who claims to have seen significant portions of what happened that night or day. We know the people who were closest to him are not getting straight answers. What we don't know is who was responsible. We don't know the full sequence of events. We don't know what information law enforcement currently has and what they're doing with it. And we don't know how this story ends. But here's what history tells us about cases like this. The ones that get solved after a long fight, they get solved because someone held on. Because a family member kept going when everyone else had moved on. Because a private investigator found a thread that unraveled something. Because a witness who'd been quiet for months finally made a phone call. The Davis family is holding on. They're going to keep holding on. And they're inviting anyone who has information, anyone who saw anything, heard anything, knows anything about what happened to Tyrone Lamar Davis Jr. on that road, under that bridge, to step forward. Not to the comments section of a live stream. To the people who can do something with it. The private investigator. The police department. The family through official channels. Because DRO's children are still here. Still growing up. Still waiting, whether they know it or not, for the day when someone can tell them the full truth about what happened to their father. They deserve that. He deserved better. Justice for DRO. That's not a slogan. It's a directive. It's a demand that a man's death be taken seriously, investigated properly, and answered completely. It's a refusal to let the system get away with doing less than its job. If this documentary reached you, if this story stayed with you, then consider what you can do with that. Share it. Keep the story in front of people who might have information. If you're in Gainesville or connected to anyone in that community, listen. Pay attention. If someone says something that sounds like it matters, it probably does. And if you have information directly related to this case, anything at all, please contact the Gainesville Police Department, or reach out to the Davis family through the official channels Natasha has posted publicly on her page. Every case like this lives or dies on the simple act of someone deciding that what they know is worth saying out loud. Be that person. Because somewhere 2 kids in middle school are growing up without their dad. And somewhere someone knows why. The truth has a longer shelf life than silence. Natasha said so. And she's right. Justice for DRO. Justice for DRO. That's not a slogan. It's a directive. It's a demand that a man's death be taken seriously, investigated properly, and answered completely. It's a refusal to let the system get away with doing less than its job. If this documentary reached you, If this story stayed with you, then consider what you can do with that. Share it. Keep the story in front of people who might have information. If you're in Gainesville or connected to anyone in that community, listen. Pay attention. If someone says something that sounds like it matters, it probably does. And if you have information directly related to this case, anything at all, please contact the Gainesville Police Department, or reach out to the Davis family through the official channels Natasha has posted publicly on her page. Every case like this lives or dies on the simple act of someone deciding that what they know is worth saying out loud. Be that person. Because somewhere 2 kids in middle school are growing up without their dad. And somewhere someone knows why. The truth has a longer shelf life than silence. Natasha said so. And she's right. Justice for Dro.